Hello, friend. Welcome to Grandpa's Horror Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your own stories. Paranormal stories from my grandpa. My family has a bunch of paranormal stories about things that have happened to us, so I figured I'd make a mini-series. I'll start with my grandpa. My grandpa worked as a gardener in the biggest cemetery in my state for about 16 years. On my grandpa's first day, he noticed that there was one section of the graveyard where the grass was significantly wilder and uglier than the rest. He asked some more seasoned workers, who told him that most gardeners were too afraid of that part to work there, saying that freaky shit always happened. But my grandfather is a hardened, 60-plus-year-old European man who survived conscription in a communist army toward the end of World War II. So he promptly thought to himself, "Fuck these pansies," and pushed a lawnmower the fuck over there. It's important to note that he didn't turn the lawnmower on, and that he was pushing it over the grass, far away from the concrete paths, and keeping his distance from the graves themselves. He got to the edge of the spooky area. Leaning down to start the lawnmower, he noticed something shiny in the grass dangerously close to the lawnmower itself. He reached out to see it was, just in case it could get caught in the blades and damage the machine. He was about to pick it up when the lawnmower started on its own. He yanked his hand away and stood up, backing away from it. Behind him, a huge cement headstone cracked in the middle, so he thought, "Fuck this," turned off the lawnmower and hightailed it the fuck out of there. For the next 16 years, all he did was spray pesticides in that general area. One day, as he was working, he saw a pile of things that were to be thrown out, and in the pile were two ornate flower vases that looked somewhat expensive. They were intact, save for a few chips. Growing up in a poor village in Europe, he hated seeing people throw usable things away, so he decided to take them home. He left them out in the garden overnight. The next day was his day off, so he spent it working in our garden and tending to our animals, chickens, ducks, pigeons, rabbits. He says that around midday, he looked down at his hands and noticed that they were covered in dried blood, and that it looked like it had come from between his fingers. He assumed that he'd hurt himself while working. There was a lot of blood, and he noted that there was no evidence of blood on the tools he'd been using or anywhere else in the garden. He went to go and wash it off, but no matter what he did, it wouldn't go off. He looked at his hands closer and noticed that the blood wasn't dried like he'd originally thought. Instead, he realized that his hands were constantly bleeding. Worried, he showed my grandma. At first, she'd thought it was a serious injury when she noticed the vases outside. When he told her he'd taken them from the cemetery, she promptly lost her shit. She was very pious and superstitious. She was a nun back in Europe for a considerable amount of time and told him to take them back, which he did that afternoon. He says that next time he looked at his hands, there was no trace of blood on them at all. My grandpa used to take me to Christmas parties with him, and one year it was hosted in an admin building near the cemetery. Someone else brought his daughter, who was around my age, so we played together for most of the day. After lunch, we got bored and snuck out of the admin building. Walking around the side of it, we found a large, empty building. It had an office desk and shelves on one end, while the rest of it looked kind of like a very small dance hall. It had a huge windowed wall and a sliding door. It looked fairly well kept, so we decided to go in and have a look, drawn mainly to the desk and the office supplies. The other girl was practicing dance moves near me, focusing on her reflection in the windows. I had just picked up a comically huge eraser to look at when the other girl said, "Hello, is this your office?" I looked up to see a tall, somewhat sallow-looking man. He was wearing dress slacks and a crumpled white shirt under a blazer. He looked like a businessman that had had a bad day, and in the Australian heat, I couldn't blame him. He stared from the girl to me, silent. I got a little creeped out because adults scared me when I was little, and I began to wonder if we weren't allowed to be in this building. I edged closer to the girl, who was blissfully unaware of anything. The movement made his eyes lock onto me. He took a step toward us, still looking at me, and I noticed that, even though he was wearing dress shoes, they made no noise on the linoleum floor. "Girls, are you here?" The other girl's dad appeared in the open doorway. His daughter smiled at him. "Yeah, we were just talking to the man. It's his office." I looked back to where the man was standing, but he was gone. Her dad frowned, confused, and ushered us out. He told us that this building was out of bounds, and more importantly, not an office. I found my grandpa soon after. I told him about what happened, and he said that he often saw a man like that watching him work. The man had waved at him once and nodded another time. He also claimed to see a woman dressed in white dancing in front of a specific grave. Whenever he walked past that grave, he said he was filled with a terrible loneliness and a strange urge to dance. Not graveyard related, but my grandparents moved to this country in '68, leaving their family back in Europe. He'd never gotten along very well with his in-laws, especially his mother-in-law, who absolutely despised him. There was a lot of fighting between my grandma and her mother while they were preparing to get married. He remembers one night he and my grandmother were lying in bed together. She was fast asleep, her back to him. He was staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He was about to doze off when he heard a familiar female voice whisper his name in his ear. He turned to my grandmother. But she was asleep, so he dismissed it and settled back down. Again, just as he was about to fall asleep, it happened again. The third time, he was sure that my grandma was messing with him. So he shook her until she rolled over to look at him. "Stop whispering in my ear," he said. "Hanoi." "I wasn't," she replied. "I was asleep." So he let her go back to sleep, and the whispers happened until 5 a.m. when he finally managed to fall asleep. He woke up at 7 a.m. to the phone ringing. He picked up the phone to find his sister-in-law on the phone looking for my grandma. He woke her up and she picked up on the phone and spoke for a few minutes. After she hung up, he found out that her mother had passed away the night before. My grandma passed away 2 years ago, and in the first month or so after she died, we all had small experiences that we think are related to her. My grandpa's, however, have been the most frequent. He's heard her singing in the kitchen, as well as the sounds of her sewing machine and overlocker, which haven't been used since about 2010, as well as the sounds of her cleaning the blinds. However, this one stuck with him the most. He woke up in the middle of the night to see my grandma sitting on her side of the bed, looking through her basket full of medication. She was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2000, and things just went downhill from there. He turned the light on, and my grandma was gone, but the medication she took every night before bed was laid out on her side.